Hi everyone! So pretty soon after starting this channel, I launched myself right into a goal of reading all of this year's Hugo Award's Best Novel finalists. I talked about this project a bit and introduced it in my May TBR, but then recently I saw somebody else who's doing a similar project, and she actually made a whole separate video about the Hugo Awards and explaining what all the finalists were and which works she was planning to read and going into all those details. And to be honest, that actually never occurred to me, but I think it's a really smart idea. So even though I'm already halfway through the list of finalists for Best Novel, I figured I'd go ahead and make this video and I'll talk a little bit about what the Hugos are and then what books I'm planning to read. The Hugo Awards are probably the most prestigious award in science fiction and fantasy. They're given out every year as part of Worldcon, and they're voted on by the members of that year's Worldcon. So they're basically an audience-voted award. The awards are given out in a ton of different categories, but for fiction, the categories are Best Novel, Novella, Novelette, Short Story, and Best Series. The newest award is actually the award for Best Series. This will only be the 4th year that it's been given out. Series have to contain at least 3 works in order to be eligible, and if they become finalists but don't win, they have to have published at least 2 more works in order to be eligible again. So the Stormlight Archive, which was a finalist in 2018, will become eligible again after book 5 is published a few years down the line. I also love that the first 2 years of this award were actually both won by Lois McMaster Bujold, who is one of my favorite authors, for 2 different series. Honestly, I am not a short fiction reader and never have been. I will occasionally read a novella as long as that novella was also written by Brandon Sanderson. To be fair, I probably should read more novellas because they can be, I think, up to 40,000 words, which is basically a short or even a regular book if you're not in science fiction and fantasy. The Hugo Awards are given out at the beginning of August. I think it should get announced on August 1st this year, so now is the perfect time to be reading my way through this list. Usually I only get to these books after the winner is announced or maybe even years later, so I thought it would be a really fun project to try reading all of the books, at least in the Best Novel category, and see what my opinions are on the finalists. As you probably know if you've been following this channel, I've already read and reviewed 3 out of the 6 finalists for Best Novel. I will go ahead and link to those reviews down below, but just a quick summary. The first one I read was Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. It was a really outrageous science fiction book and I loved it a lot. The next one was A Memory Called Empire by Arkady Martine, which is a really smart, thoughtful exploration of culture and memory and colonialism. So I reviewed that one as well. And then most recently, I read Middle Game by Shannon McGuire, which is more of a contemporary standalone fantasy. And I had more mixed feelings about that book, although I did enjoy it. Now I'll just quickly go over the books that are still left for me to read on the Best Novel finalists list. We have The 10,000 Doors of January by Alex E. Harrow, which is a standalone fantasy set in the 1900s. I don't know much about this, but I'm expecting it to be more of a story with magical realism or some fairy tale or fantasy elements rather than necessarily a typical fantasy book. We have The Light Brigade by Cameron Hurley, which is a military science fiction. And then we have another science fiction, The City in the Middle of the Night by Charlie Jane Anders, which seems like it's about humans settling on another planet in the distant future. Just based on the descriptions and themes, out of those 3 books, The City in the Middle of the Night would be the book that I would normally be the most excited to read. However, I read one other book by Charlie Jane Anders, which was also award nominated and everyone seemed to really love, and I didn't like it at all, so I have some concerns going into this book. But other than that previous reading experience, there's no reason for me to feel like I wouldn't like it. And out of the other 2 authors, I haven't read anything by them before, so I don't have a lot of expectations. Since I'm already halfway through the novel list and we have a couple months to go, I've been thinking of adding a few more Hugo finalists to my TBR. Since it's obviously not going to be short fiction, I was thinking about checking out some of the works that are nominated for Best Series. Even though I'm a fast reader, there's no way I can read 6 full series by the end of July unless I do literally nothing else with my time between now and then. But I can probably read the first book in each one of those series. So now let's take a quick look at the 2020 finalists for Best Series. First, we have The Expanse by James S.A. Corey. We actually already own the first book in this series. And the bookmark is from my husband, who started reading this book shortly before I derailed him by giving him Gideon the Ninth, but he said he really liked the first few chapters. A few friends of ours have also recommended the show pretty highly, but we've been waiting to watch the show until we've at least started reading the series. There are 8 of these out already, so it seems like a pretty hefty series. The next series is Encrypted by Seanan McGuire. After reading Middle Game, I've been really curious to check out more of her work, especially the more urban fantasy stuff. I don't currently have any urban fantasy series that I really enjoy. It's never really been my thing, but I'm hoping to see if this will change my mind. This series has 9 books, so it's pretty long. The next series is the Luna series by Ian McDonald. I've never heard of this series or the author. I don't know anything about it. This series only has 3 books and a novella so far. I'm not sure if it's supposed to be complete or not. Another science fiction series on the list is Planetfall by Emma Newman. This is also an author I've never heard of. This seems to be a 4-book series, and at least according to what I read online, it seems like you can read it in any order, which is kind of interesting. I'll probably just stick to publication order, but I'm curious to see what this is all about. Next, I actually don't need to read because I've already read it. This is the Winternight series by Katherine Arden. This is a fantasy series that is basically the author's love letter to Russian folklore. I read this series in the past few years. It's very atmospheric and beautiful and sometimes just reads like a fairy tale, although the further you go in this series, it gets a little more action-packed. This is a series that I really enjoyed a lot, and the right reader will really enjoy it. The last series is the Wormwood Trilogy by Tade Thompson, another series and author that's unfamiliar to me. I've really been reading a lot more science fiction than usual because of this Hugo's list. I tend to stick a lot more to fantasy in general when I'm picking for myself, so it'll be interesting to see if I have any new favorites after this year's Hugo's. But I don't need to worry too much about not reading enough fantasy because I am planning to keep going with my Cosmere reread this year. So out of that best series finalists list, I'll try to read the first book in 5 series that I haven't read before, and I'll do reviews of each one of those, and maybe it'll give you guys some ideas of series that you might want to pick up. Let me know down in the comments if you've read any of these series, especially the ones that I haven't even heard of, and if I'm missing out on something great by never having heard of them. Please like and subscribe if you want to see more videos from me.